running a household, you know, all that stuff. On top of, you know, I do YouTube stuff all the time, you know, I do at least, at the very least, a short every day. On top of that, I try to do a long form video like this, where it's broken up into several chunks just because of the way my GoPro is right now. But I got that Kdenlive, and as soon as I'm done figuring out OBS, and I got that all set up and I'm rocking on Kick, I'm going to start learning that Kdenlive. That way I'll be able to make some way better YouTube videos, because I'll be able to edit stuff. And I only make like one YouTube video, one long form YouTube video a week. So it should be, I should be able to stick in that time frame of, you know, making the video and editing it and releasing it within a week. I'd like to get a live stream going on YouTube. I'm going to wait until I have kind of a platform down on Kick to do that. In the meantime, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing. And, yeah, it's coming along. You know, I've been really focusing on doing something, being consistent with my YouTube page for the last, I don't know, maybe 4 months, 4.5 months, maybe. You know, posting a short every day, and just in the last month or 2 months or so doing long form stuff, you know, and breaking it up. And I've doubled my subscribers. It's only 200, a little over 200. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, kind of pathetic to some people, but to me, for a guy that, you know, took years to get to 90 people, just, you know, putting something up here and there, to get up to 200 in just a few months, because I'm trying, you know. And hopefully more people will see it, and the algorithm will see it, and all that shit. And you know, the idea is with the lives is just to talk with people, you know, talk about random stuff, current events. I like to do the conspiracy stuff and the cryptids and shit like that a lot. So, you know, it'd be cool to talk about that stuff a little bit more. So now we're gonna add just a slightly darker, just barely darker pink. It'd probably be almost hard to notice. Like you can kind of see how the pink is layering right there, just tiniest bit. By the time it blends in, it's hard to even notice, but it makes a difference. It really does. It makes a difference. Yep, and that's you know, I'll talk about whatever, man, just like I am right now. Current events, you know, what's going on in the world, movies, not so much music and games. Not that I'm opposed to talking about that stuff. It's just I don't know a lot about that stuff. I mean, I can tell you it's coming out. Some of that stuff's spilling over a tiny bit. We'll take care of that here in a little bit when we color their hair. Yeah, I just don't know so much about music and video games and whatnot. I'm willing to learn, though. You know, I play a little bit of video games here and there. I think I got an Xbox 360, and I've played all the Halo games and shit, you know. But like, I go months and months without touching a video game. But yeah, I got the 360, and I got the 1S. The 1S that I got, I only bought it for a Blu-ray player and just to have a game system for my kid, who ended up being more of a computer gamer. So I'd be surprised if I got 12 hours of use on that Xbox 1S that I got. That's probably 4 or 5 years old. Still got the box for it. I keep a dust cover on it. I like taking care of my stuff. But yeah, don't play games too much. Like I said, I played all the Halos on the 360 from back in the day. You know, I got the what do you call it? Battlefront 2. Played that a little bit. Nothing online. Never played anybody in online in my life. Not once at 43 years old. I've never played an online video game against somebody. So, not against it, just never done it. Never. For a long time, games to me weren't immersive enough. Until just recently, I saw myself maybe being able to start playing a little bit. Because my kid, his uncle got him a VR headset for Christmas last year. And just playing that a little bit, you know, looking around at what my kid's playing and just putting it on a few times. You know, coupled with some of the technology I've seen, like the simulator chairs, I could get down with that. Like, I could totally get down with VR headset Star Wars, you know, if with a simulator too, so I could be in a freaking chair, you know, pitching, you know, forward, aft, you know, all that shit. That would be cool. I could get into that. But, you know, for the longest time, I was like, you know, games need to be like fucking The Matrix for me to be involved. Like, otherwise I'm just staring at a screen and having to think more than I want. You know, games got to... That's why I like the Halo games, because you just run around shooting stuff. And that's all you're doing. So that's cool. And I can get used to that, you know? But when you're, you know, like, when games started getting, like, Splinter Cell and shit, where you had to, like, really, like, holy Christ, what's going on with this game? When they started getting like that is when I kind of checked out, so it's been a while. And, yeah. But yeah, now that they're getting, you know, all this VR technology and getting stuff like that, I can get back into it, I think, you know? And only time will tell. We'll see what happens. We shall see what happens. Now, what color should their little uniforms be? They got the pink hats. You know, they got the pink hats, they got the blue faces, and the orange hair. So... these two fellas have ties, and these two fellas don't. This guy looks, you know, looks like he's working. I used to do that when I was in North Dakota working. I was working on a yard, and, you know, a lot of fencing and big rolls of all different gauges of fence and all sorts of pipe and all sorts of shit. We'd have to unload that stuff. Well, I would have to unload that stuff with bobcats and with big heavy-duty forklifts and stuff, and I used to make a face just like that, except I'd stick a tongue out of my mouth, or I'd be smoking a cigarette. I'd almost have to always be smoking a cigarette to do this shit, to be unloading stuff. Just seemed like that was the way to do it. Let me see, I think I'm gonna go with like a lavendery kind of a look for these fellas here. We'll see what it looks like. Okay, I can live with that. Yeah, that was a job that I don't miss, that I learned a lot on. You know, before I moved out to North Dakota in 2013, I just had my son. Well, you know, we had our son. And I was like, I need to get the hell out of this town and go make some real money, you know? I'm not going to make any money. That's the one thing that sucks about living where I live, is there's no money up here in the Upper Peninsula. You know, unless you, like, own a bar or something, you're not going to make any money. You're just not. That's the one downside up here. You know, I guess if you work remotely, you could easily make, you know, good money, but then you're not really depending on the environment to make money. If you're working remotely, you could be working anywhere. So I feel like that doesn't count. But in one way, it's a good thing, because it's driven me to start doing this. You know, I went out to North Dakota after I had my son. And because at the time there was a big oil boom going on, and there's money to be made, and I went out there and made money and paid bills and paid for my son's existence while I was out there, and yeah, so it's a good thing, you know. Paid off some bills, made my debt a little less, paid off some student loans, but yeah, for the most part. You know, I came back with an old Honda and a bunch of skills. Now I can use any tool in the world. Like, when I went out there, I was really a kind of a green. Even at 32 years old, the only stuff I'd done construction-wise was, like, manual labor, you know, digging and stuff, grunt work, you know. And when I went out there, it was like, you know, skilled labor. You had to, like, learn how to do stuff. So that's what I had to do. And, you know, things like learning how to use a bobcat, that kind of stuff is pretty valuable. You know, that's stuff you can use in your life at some point, you know. And I have ever since then. I've learned how, you know, I've used the bobcat many times since I got back up to Michigan for all sorts of stuff. For helping my new old landlord out to plow, shit like that. You know, these are good skills to have. Like I said, I learned how to use every tool there was, you know, chop saws and skill saws and sawzalls and, you know, freaking band saws of all sizes and shapes, and learned some basic welding, you know, learned how to use a forklift. Fuck. To drive big-ass trucks with, you know, little tiny trailers for air compressors, all the way up to 53-foot trailers with bobcats on them, and more tons than I should have had. So it's like, shit. These are skills that are good to have in life, And I'll tell you what's funny is driving the big trailer around was easier than driving with the little trailer. That was funny. The big 50-foot trailer. I remember when I first was going to drive that, I was terrified. They're like, "Oh, you're driving the compressor around, you'll be fine." And I thought they were just messing with me, because they were always doing that kind of shit around there. They're always fucking with people. And but no, they were like, they meant it. Like, "Oh, you're gonna be fine. You've driven the compressor around." And it was just like, what the fuck? But they were right, and it was true, and it did work. It worked out. A lot of good skills. It's funny when you do something in life that you don't think that you've never done before, and you don't know if you can do it. Like a true test of yourself. Like me going out to North Dakota was that for me. When I went out there, I had my intent was to work in oil because that's what was going on. I was like, oh, I should go work on the oil patches, and make that money, because that's what other people were doing in my neck of the woods, Going out to North Dakota and working in the oil, you didn't even have to know what you were doing. They'll just hire you because you're alive. Well, by the time I got out there, it wasn't like that anymore. You had to have some experience. And, yeah, I didn't have that, so I just found a job in light construction, putting up fences. And that's what I did the whole time I was out there. We worked in oil a lot. A lot of the stuff we put up was around oil facilities and shit, so... And I made pretty good money, I was making $25 an hour, and this was 15 years ago. Before the cost of living shit went to hell, But, yeah. Was able to come back and see my kid every couple months. So it worked out. Stayed with that job the whole 3.5, 4 years I was out there. And I liked it, It worked out. I liked it a lot. Did the trick. Learned a lot of stuff, like I said. Met some decent people, met some douchebags. But, I'm sure they'll say the same thing, probably. Oh, that one guy was a douchebag. It's funny how it works. I like how that looks, when the alcohol sets on itself like that. It's that interesting look. Yep. Came back here to Michigan and used the, my landlord at the time. I didn't have a lot of money because I was just back from North Dakota, and I was cleaning the house to kind of save a few bucks in rent. And he asked me, is there anything else you know how to do? I need, you want to shovel the house or whatever? You know how to use a bobcat? And I said, yeah. It was one of the fancy ones that I just had the smallest amount of training on, because I learned how to do most of my stuff on the stick and pedal, the old school bobcats. And this was one of the newer ISO ones where it's all on the handles and stuff. So, other than that, though, I just told him, yeah, I had a smaller amount of training on that one, but no problem. Hopped on and did it. Shoveled a bunch of shit, shoveled a bunch of his properties out, and worked out pretty good. Knocked some more rent off of me, so everybody wins. Put this guy's orange beard on right here. Oh, this is a nice dark orange. Maybe I'll go over their hair again with this guy. But yeah, my point is, like, when I went out to North Dakota, I had never left the area as an adult, more than a couple 100 miles. I'd never done any of the construction stuff like this to that level, or the oil, or any of that shit. I'd never really even driven across country to that, almost 1,000 miles. I'd never even done that, even at 30-something, I just lived at home mainly, and, but I took a leap of faith, And it worked out. It really did. And it gave me confidence in a lot of ways to do other things in my life. And even to, like, do what I'm doing right now with this. To try to do some of this type of stuff, you know? So, be wary of things in life, but always, if you have faith, it might work out, you know? It really might. Put some, like, spots on these guys, just for the shits of it. To kind of make them a little blotchy looking. But yeah, take that leap of faith. I've told my whole story about when I was out in North Dakota, about how the guy that told me, how I went out there a couple weeks ahead on a bus to see a buddy and check stuff out, and went and saw a guy that told me to come out there and he's got a job for me. And that same guy I went to told me he didn't have a job for me when I moved all my shit out there. How I had to get help from a church and stay at a man camp and all this stuff. And how I was literally packing my car up to go home with my tail between my legs because I couldn't make it happen, when I got the call from the guy who in the beginning told me he had a job for me, who told me he didn't have a job for me, who's now telling me he's got a job for me. So, I mean, it was a leap of faith, but it did pay off. But it worked out, It really did. It worked out. And, just saying. Always be willing. I mean, if I hadn't had the kid, I probably wouldn't have done it, honestly. I probably wouldn't have done it. I probably would have just been like, oh, well, I hadn't done anything like that before, But when I had the kid, it was go time, Something in me changed and was like, nope, this time you gotta go out and do it, So I did. And I'm proud about that, one thing at least. So if you ever think you can't do it, people, you can. Sometimes it only happens when you need it to happen, but I'd rather have it happen when I need it to happen than not happen at all, And now I know that is possible. Now, driving across country is like nothing to me. Since then, I've done it a bunch of times. Like, when I was out there, I had to drive back to Michigan every, 6 weeks or so through shitty weather